The message was not a request. It was a command. It flashed on every screen across Earth. The face was alien, a kafar. Its eyes held no warmth, only a cold, superior look. It spoke of progress and unity. It said humanity's time was over. The Cathar had formed a galactic consortium for peace and efficiency. They said humanity was a disruption. Our technology was decades behind. Our ships were slow. Our weapons were weak. Our computers were simple. We were obsolete. We were ordered to stand down, to surrender our fleets, to join their perfect system. This was an ultimatum. If we refused, they would come. They would bring their Armada. They would show us true power. They would erase our resistance from the stars. On the bridge of the aging battleship OGS Warspite, Admiral Jax Vance watched the message end. The screen went black. He saw his own tired face reflected back. He was an old man. His hair was gray. His face was lined with memories of many fights. He had served for 40 years. He had watched as newer ships were designed. He had asked for them. He warned that the galaxy was not friendly. But money was short. Politicians talked of peace. They said war was over. So the Warspite and her sisters were not replaced. They became a museum fleet. Now the museums were all that stood between Earth and destruction. Jax did not feel fear. He felt a deep, cold anger. He looked at his crew. They were young. They had joined for a quiet life. They were not warriors. But he saw their jaws tighten. He saw fire in their eyes. They understood the message. This was about survival. Jax opened a channel to all ships. His voice was calm and low. It went to every ship near Earth. He did not give a big speech. He did not talk of glory. He just stated a fact. They say we are obsolete. They say we are weak. They think their new tech makes them invincible. But they forgot one thing. They have never fought us. All ships to battle stations. We will not surrender. We will not run. Let them come. Let them see what obsolete really means. The Cathar Armada arrived at the edge of our solar system. Their ships did not look like warships. They looked like art. Sleek, silver shapes that glided without sound. Their sensors showed immense power. Energy levels we could not match. Shields that could block a star's fire. This was not a fleet. It was a message of total superiority. Admiral Jax Vance watched them on his screen. His display was a sea of red enemy icons. They outnumbered his forces 10-1. His officers were silent. This was not a battle. It was an execution. But Jax knew war. He knew that great power often had a weakness: arrogance. The Cathar moved in a perfect, precise formation. It was a parade move. It was meant to scare us. It was not meant for a real fight. Jax made his first move. He did not attack the main fleet. A small group of civilian ships was fleeing Mars. They were in the Armada's path. The Cathar ignored them. They were not here for civilians. They were here for the Navy. Jax saw his chance. He ordered the Warspite and 2 cruisers to break away. It was a dangerous move. It took them far from Earth's defense line, but he had to test the enemy. The Cathar reacted as he thought. One small destroyer left the group to stop the Warspite. It was a dismissive gesture, like swatting a fly. The Cathar ship fired one precise energy beam. It aimed to disable the Warspite's engines, to capture it. The beam hit the Warspite's shields. They flared and shook, but they held. The Warspite was old, but her shields were strong, just not smart. Jax smiled a thin smile. Now it was his turn. He did not aim for the enemy's shields. He aimed for its main sensor array, a delicate part on its hull. The Warspite's railguns fired. They were not energy weapons. They were giant metal slugs thrown by magnets. They were simple. They were brute force. The Cathar ship, trusting its shields, did not move. The slugs ripped through the silver hull like paper. There was no big explosion, just a sudden, silent decompression. The ship drifted away, dead. A cheer went up on the Warspite's bridge. They had drawn first blood. But Jax felt no joy. He had just poked a hornet's nest. On the screen, 100 Cathar ships turned towards him. Their perfect formation broke. They were coming for him. The test was over. The real war had begun.
The victory was short. A storm of silver ships attacked the Warspite. Energy beams filled the space around them. The Warspite's shields glowed white. They were struggling. Alarms sounded everywhere. A console exploded. An officer fell back, his suit smoking. Admiral Jax shouted orders. His voice was steady in the chaos. He fought a retreat. He used asteroids and Jupiter's gravity to help. The Cathar were fast and strong, but they were predictable. They always went for the kill shot. They always targeted the biggest energy source. Jax used that against them. He told a damaged frigate to overload its engines. It created a huge energy signal. 3 Cathar ships fired at it. While they were distracted, the Warspite and her cruisers hit them from the side. 2 more enemy ships were destroyed. But it was not enough. For every ship they killed, 10 more appeared. The Warspite was being hurt. Her side was breached. Life support on 2 decks was down. They were being pushed back towards Earth. The hope from the first kill was fading. They were brave. They were clever. But they were too outnumbered. As they limped home, a secret message came. It used a code Jax had not seen in 20 years, a code from his old Black Ops days. It was a location, coordinates in the asteroid belt, and one word, anchor. Jax felt a jolt, not hope, curiosity. He knew the rumors about Project Anchor. It was a legend, a last-ditch plan from a more fearful time. He thought it was a myth. He ordered the Warspite to the coordinates. He left the main fleet to hold the crumbling line. The trip was dangerous. Cathar patrols were everywhere. They moved slowly, hiding in the asteroids. The Warspite was badly damaged. Every move felt like it might be her last. They reached the coordinates. There was nothing there, just empty space and some big rocks. Jax was ready to give up. Then a signal came from the largest asteroid. A door opened in the rock. It was a huge, hidden hangar bay. Jax guided the wounded Warspite inside. The door closed behind them. They were in a giant space, lit by red lights. And in the center of the hangar was a ship. It was not a new ship. It was older than the Warspite. It was a relic from the past. The ship was a Leviathan-class dreadnought, a design retired before Jax was born. Its hull was thick steel, not modern materials. It was covered in giant gun turrets and missile launchers. It had heavy armor plates. It looked slow. It looked heavy. It looked brutally simple. This was Project Anchor. As Jax stepped onto the docking platform, a person walked towards him. An old woman. Her back was straight. Her eyes were sharp. She wore a retired admiral's uniform. Jax knew her. Admiral Eva Rostova, a living legend. She had commanded the fleet during the Pirate Wars 50 years ago. Everyone thought she was dead. She smiled at Jax. It was a dry, knowing smile. "Welcome to the museum, Admiral Vance," she said. Her voice was like gravel. "I see you brought the Cathar to our door." Jax ignored her comment. "What is this, Rostova?" "This is Project Anchor," she said, pointing at the old dreadnought. "And that is the OGS Vanguard. She is the last of her kind. We have others." Jax looked around the huge hangar. In the shadows he saw more shapes, more old ships, battleships, carriers, cruisers, all from a bygone era, a fleet of ghosts. "You hid a whole fleet," Jax said. Rostova nodded. "We did. When the politicians chose peace, we chose to prepare. We knew this day would come. Technology is not everything. Sometimes simple is better." Jax felt a strange feeling. It was not quite hope. It was possibility. These ships were tough. They were built to take a hit and keep fighting. They had no complex AI, no systems to hack. They were controlled by human hands. They were the opposite of the Cathar fleet. But they were so old, so out of date. "Can they even fight?" Jax asked. Rostova's smile widened. "Oh, they can fight. They do not have fancy energy weapons. They have kinetics, projectiles, missiles with real warheads. They are loud and they are messy, but they work. The Cathar rely on technology we do not even understand. They use electronic warfare to disable ships. They hack systems, but you cannot hack a steel bullet. You cannot disable a gun that is aimed by a human eye. Come, Admiral, let me show you your new flagship."
Back at Earth, the situation was dire. The main human fleet was being torn apart. The Cathar ships moved like lightning. They fired beams of pure energy. They targeted human ships with perfect accuracy. A human cruiser would lose power, its shields would fail, its weapons would go silent. Then it would be destroyed. It was not a battle, it was a slaughter. The Cathar were using a weapon we had not expected: electronic warfare. They sent out pulses that confused our computers. They hacked our systems from a distance. Our advanced ships, with their smart AI and networked systems, were vulnerable. They became useless hunks of metal. The Cathar commander watched from his flagship. It was a magnificent vessel, smooth and silent. He felt nothing but contempt for these humans. They were primitive. They fought with emotion. They were disorganized. It was time to end this. He gave the order. The entire Armada moved forward. They would break the human line and head straight for Earth. They would bomb their cities from orbit. They would show the galaxy the price of defiance. On Earth, people watched in horror. The news feeds showed their navy being destroyed. The end was near. Panic began to set in. But deep in the asteroid belt, something stirred. Aboard the OGS Vanguard, Admiral Jax Vance took command. The bridge was old. It had physical buttons and levers. It had simple screens. There were no complex AI voices, just the hum of old machinery and the quiet talk of the crew. Rostova stood beside him. She would be his advisor. The fleet of old ships powered up. Their engines roared to life. They were not silent. They were loud and powerful. They moved out of the hidden base. One by one, they entered normal space. They formed a rough line. They were not pretty. They were not fast. But they were solid. They were determined. Jax opened a channel to the whole fleet. His voice was calm. "Crew of the Anchor Fleet, the enemy is at our door. They think we are relics. They think we are weak. They have beaten our best ships with tricks and technology, but they have not fought us. They have not fought ships with soul. They have not fought men and women who will not break. Today, we show them what obsolete really means. All ships forward for Earth." The old fleet turned. They pointed their heavy bows towards Earth, towards the invading Armada. They began to move. They were slow, but they were steady. They were coming. The Cathar Armada detected the new contacts immediately. Their sensors classified the old human ships as low-level threats. Their energy signatures were weak.
Their profiles were primitive. The Kthar commander gave a dismissive order. A squadron of his fastest destroyers broke off to engage the relics. They would clear this minor nuisance. The destroyers closed in. They began their standard attack. They launched powerful electronic pulses designed to disable ship systems. The pulses washed over the human ships, and nothing happened. The old ships kept coming. Their engines burned steadily. Their weapons remained active. There were no complex computers to crash, no networked systems to hijack. The pulses found nothing to latch onto. The human ships were ghosts in the machine. The Kthar destroyers hesitated. This was not in their tactical data. They switched to energy weapons. Beams of light slammed into the lead human ship, the OGS Vanguard. The thick steel armor glowed red where it was hit, but it held. It did not vaporize. It absorbed the blow. Then the Vanguard returned fire. It was not a beam of light. It was a deafening roar from its massive main cannons. Huge shells, each the size of a ground car, hurtled across space. They were not fast. The Kthar ships easily dodged them. The Kthar commander smiled. This was pathetic. But Admiral Jax Vance had not been aiming for the ships. He had been aiming for the space around them. The shells exploded, not with light, but with clouds of dense metallic chaff. It was an ancient tactic. The cloud of metal fragments spread out, creating a storm of interference. The Kthar sensors were suddenly blinded. Their targeting systems fizzed with static. Inside the cloud, the human ships were hidden. The Kthar destroyers, now blind, slowed down. They were confused. This was not clean. This was not orderly. It was chaos. And from within that chaos, the human ships emerged. They were close, too close for the Kthar's long-range weapons to be effective. The human ships opened up with everything they had: smaller caliber guns, missile batteries, and point defense cannons. It was not a precise strike. It was a wall of solid metal and fire. The Kthar destroyers, with their light armor, were shredded. They exploded into 1,000 glittering pieces. The first engagement was over. The human fleet had won. They had not won with technology. They had won with a simple, brutal trick. The Kthar commander watched the debris float past his view screen. His smile was gone. He felt a new emotion: annoyance. The easy victory was over. The entire Kthar Armada now turned its attention to the anchor fleet. This was no longer a minor nuisance. This was an insult. Waves of enemy fighters swarmed towards the old human ships. The human fleet formed a defensive sphere, a tactic called the Turtle. Their point defense guns, old but reliable, began to chatter. Tracers filled the space around them. It was not a perfect shield. Kthar fighters were fast. They weaved through the fire. They launched plasma torpedoes. The human ships began to take damage. An old cruiser, the OGS Sentinel, took a direct hit to its engine. It lost power and started to drift, but its guns kept firing. Another ship, a carrier, launched its own fighters. They were old atmospheric models, retrofitted for space. They were slow and clumsy, but their pilots were fearless. They flew straight into the enemy swarms, guns blazing. It was a brutal, close-range brawl. The Kthar were not used to this. Their warfare was about precision from a distance. This was messy and personal. Admiral Jax directed the battle from the Vanguard's bridge. He saw a pattern. The Kthar always attacked the strongest signal. He used it. He ordered the most damaged ship to broadcast a powerful distress call. As he predicted, a group of Kthar cruisers focused on it. They moved in for the kill. As they closed, Jax ordered his rest of his fleet to concentrate all fire on those cruisers. The Kthar ships were caught off guard. Their shields flickered under the overwhelming kinetic assault. One cruiser's shield failed. A volley of shells punched through its hull. It broke in half. The human fleet was taking losses, but they were giving better than they got. They fought like a cornered animal. They used every trick in the book.
They launched debris to confuse sensors. They used the wreckage of their own ships as cover. The battle was no longer one-sided. The Kthar's advance had stalled. They were being forced to fight a war they did not understand, a war of attrition, a war of grit. The Kthar commander had seen enough. This farce was costing him ships and time. He gave the order to deploy the Apex. The Apex was his flagship, a super dreadnought. It was 10 times the size of the largest human ship. Its main weapon was a planet killer, a gravitational beam that could tear a world apart. It moved forward, a silent silver mountain of death. The smaller Kthar ships parted to make way for it. The sight of it made the human bridge crews freeze for a second. It was power on a scale they could not comprehend. The Apex targeted the OGS Vanguard. It did not fire its main weapon. That was for planets. Instead, it launched a spread of 100 hunter missiles. Each one was smart. Each one could change course. They streaked towards the Vanguard. The Vanguard's point defense guns worked furiously. Missile after missile was blown apart. But there were too many. A dozen got through. They slammed into the Vanguard's hull. The ship shook violently. Alarms blared. Reports of damage flooded the bridge. A fire broke out in engineering. They had lost their long-range communications. Admiral Jax was thrown from his chair. He got up, his lip bleeding. He looked at the view screen. The Apex was turning for another attack. "We cannot take another hit like that," his weapons officer yelled. Jax knew he was right. The Vanguard was tough, but it had its limits. The entire anchor fleet was now focusing its fire on the Apex. Shells and missiles bounced harmlessly off its powerful shields. It was like throwing pebbles at a fortress. They were doing no damage. The Apex's weapons glowed again, targeting another human battleship. Jax had to think fast. He could not win a direct fight. He had to be smarter. He remembered the Kthar weakness, their reliance on technology, their arrogance. He looked at the tactical display. He saw the patterns of the Kthar ships. They always protected their command ship. They always moved in predictable ways. He had an idea. It was a desperate, crazy idea, but it was the only one he had. He turned to Admiral Rostova. Her face was grim, but she nodded. She saw the same thing he did. It was time for the oldest trick in the book, a suicide run.
Jax's plan was simple, too simple. The Apex was powerful, but it was also big and slow to turn. Its main weapon was on its forward section. Its rear, where the engines were, was less armed and less shielded. "We need to hit its engines," Jax said over the fleet-wide channel. His voice was calm but urgent. "We need to get behind it. The entire fleet will create a diversion. We will make them look forward. The Vanguard will make a flanking maneuver. We will use the debris field from the battle as cover. It is a long shot. The Vanguard might not survive the approach, but if we can disable its engines, we can immobilize it. The rest of the fleet can then overwhelm it." It was a huge risk. The Vanguard was their command ship. If it was destroyed, the fight would be over. But they had no other choice. The order was given. The remaining human ships, battered and bleeding, gathered for one last charge. They flew straight at the Apex, firing every weapon they had left. It was a glorious, hopeless attack. The Kthar commander saw it. He laughed. The humans were making their final foolish stand. He ordered all forward weapons to fire. He would wipe them out in one glorious blast. He did not notice the single damaged battleship slipping away. The OGS Vanguard, with Jax and Rostova on board, powered down all non-essential systems. They became as dark and silent as a rock. They used the cloud of wreckage and chaff from the earlier fighting as a screen. They moved slowly, careful not to give off any energy signature. On the bridge, everyone held their breath. They watched the main fleet sacrifice itself. Ship after ship was vaporized by the Apex's overwhelming firepower. It was hard to watch, but it was working. The Kthar were completely focused on the frontal assault.
The vanguard crept around the side of the massive battle. They were now behind the apex. The giant engines of the super dreadnought glowed before them. They were so close. Now, Jax whispered. All power to engines. Full speed ahead. Target their engine cores. Fire everything. The vanguard roared to life. Its engines flared brightly, giving away its position. It surged forward like a wounded beast charging its hunter. The Cathar commander saw the new threat on his sensors too late. The vanguard was already in point-blank range. The Apex's rear defensive guns woke up. They spat energy bolts at the charging battleship. The vanguard's forward armor took the hits. Metal melted and vaporized. The ship shook so hard it felt like it would fly apart. But it kept going. It did not slow down. Jax held onto his console, his knuckles white. "Fire!" he yelled. The vanguard unleashed its full broadside. Every cannon, every missile launcher, every gun on its starboard side fired at once. The volley slammed into the Apex's engine section. The shields there were weaker. They flared and collapsed. The heavy shells tore into the delicate engine housings. There was a series of internal explosions. A brilliant blue-white flash erupted from the Apex's stern. The giant ship lurched. Its smooth movement stopped. The constant hum of its engines died. It was dead in the water. But the victory came at a cost. The vanguard had taken too much damage. Its forward section was a mangled wreck. Life support was failing. The bridge was filled with smoke. Admiral Rostova was on the floor, a piece of shrapnel in her shoulder. Medics rushed to her side. Jax coughed, trying to see the screen. He saw the Apex, drifting silently. He had done it. He had crippled the beast, but the vanguard was dying. Escape pods launched from the dying ship. Jax refused to leave. He would go down with his ship. Then a hand grabbed his arm. It was Rostoma, pale but conscious. "The fight is not over, Admiral," she rasped. "They need you. The fleet needs its commander." He finally nodded. He helped her to an escape pod. They were the last to leave. As their pod shot away from the vanguard, they saw the old battleship explode. It was a final bright star in the dark sky. But its sacrifice had worked. The Cathar Armada was in disarray. Their leader was silent. Their flagship was disabled. The tide of the battle had turned. The destruction of the Apex sent a shockwave through the Cathar fleet. Their perfect coordination broke. Without their central command, the ships began to act independently. Some continued to fight. Others held their position, confused. A few even started to retreat. The remaining human ships, inspired by the vanguard's sacrifice, pressed their advantage. They fought with renewed fury. They hunted the leaderless Cathar ships. The battle became a series of small, violent fights. The humans used their old, reliable weapons to pick off the enemy. It was not a clean victory. It was a bloody, hard-fought grind. But they were winning. On the crippled Apex, the Cathar commander was furious. His bridge was dark. Emergency lights flashed. His crew was dead or injured. He could not believe it. He had been defeated by primitives, by rocks thrown from ancient slingshots. It made no sense. His logic could not process it. Then a communication request came through. It was from a human escape pod. It was Admiral Jax Vance. The Cathar commander accepted the call. Jax's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired and bruised, but his eyes were steady. "You have lost," Jax said simply. The Cathar commander hissed. "You have not won. You have merely broken my ship. My armada is still vast. We will rebuild. We will return. Your victory is temporary." "Why?" he demanded. "How is this possible? Your ships are garbage. Your technology is a joke. You should have been destroyed in the first minute of battle. Explain this." Jax looked at the alien commander. He saw the confusion, the anger, the complete lack of understanding. He knew then that he had won more than just a battle. He had broken their spirit. He had proven their entire philosophy wrong. He decided to give the commander his answer. It was not the answer the Cathar expected. "You want to know how we won?" Jack said to the Cathar commander. "You think it is a mystery. It is not. You lost because you forgot what war is. You built the perfect weapon, a fleet that cannot be outthought by a computer, a fleet that fights with perfect logic. But you made one mistake. You built a fleet to fight a war against yourselves. You assumed your enemy would also use perfect logic. We do not." The Cathar commander was silent, listening. Jax continued. "Your greatest weapon was your electronic warfare. You could disable any advanced ship, so we used ships with no advanced systems. You rely on your sensors and targeting computers, so we blinded them with simple chaff. You move in perfect formations, so we forced you into a messy brawl. You see, your technology has a weakness. It can only solve problems it understands. It cannot handle chaos. It cannot handle a man who is willing to fly his ship into yours. It cannot handle a crew that will fight to the last breath, even when their ship is breaking apart. You called us obsolete. You were right. We are obsolete for the clean, simple war you wanted to fight. But war is never clean. It is never simple. It is ugly and bloody and illogical. And for that kind of war, we are the most advanced species in the galaxy. We did not win with better technology. We won because we are human. And that is something your computers will never understand."
The Cathar commander stared at Jax's image. The words made no sense to him. They were emotional. They were irrational. They were a flaw in the universe. He felt a rage he had never known. This human was not just an enemy. He was an insult to logic itself. "You are a mistake," the Cathar commander spat. "A biological error. I will correct it myself." He still had one weapon, his personal escape shuttle. It was armed. He would hunt down Jax's pod and destroy it. It was not a tactical decision. It was personal. It was emotional. The very thing he despised. He left his bridge and entered his shuttle. It detached from the dying apex and sped towards Jax's life pod. Jack saw it coming on his pod's simple scanner. He was not surprised. He had expected the commander's pride would not let him surrender. The shuttle was fast and well armed. The life pod was slow and defenseless. It seemed like an easy kill. But Jax had one last trick. He broadcast a short, powerful signal on a wide band. It was not a distress call. It was a recording of the Cathar's own surrender ultimatum, followed by the sound of the Apex's engines exploding. Then he shut down his pod's engine. He let it drift. The Cathar shuttle closed in, its weapons locked on. The commander was about to fire when he saw something on his sensor. Other signals were moving. The remaining human ships had heard Jax's broadcast. They knew where he was. They knew he was in danger. They turned towards the Cathar shuttle. They did not fire. They simply moved to block its path. They formed a wall of steel between the shuttle and the escape pod. The Cathar commander fired his weapons. He damaged one ship, then another. But more human ships came. They were battered. They were broken. But they would not move. They protected their admiral. The commander realized he could not get through. He was surrounded. He had lost. His rage turned to a cold, empty feeling. He had been defeated not by a weapon, but by an idea. The idea of loyalty. He powered down his weapons. His shuttle drifted silently, a prisoner of the fleet it had come to destroy. The battle was over. The Cathar Armada was in full retreat. Their ships turned and fled into the darkness of deep space. They left behind a field of wreckage, the remains of their mighty fleet and the brave human ships that had stopped them. The silence that followed was heavy.
On Earth, the news spread slowly. Then cheers erupted. They had won. Against all odds, they had won. In the aftermath, recovery began. Escape pods were collected. The wounded were treated. The dead were mourned. Admiral Jax Vance was recovered from his pod. He stood on the bridge of one of the surviving ships, looking out at the battlefield. It was a sobering sight. They had paid a high price. Most of the anchor fleet was gone. The OGS Vanguard was dust, but Earth was safe. The Galactic Consortium's message of surrender was withdrawn. Across the galaxy, other species watched. They had seen the mighty Cathar humbled. They had seen that advanced technology was not everything. They saw the power of determination, the power of the human spirit. New messages began to arrive on Earth, not threats, offers of communication, offers of trade, offers of alliance. The species that had been afraid of the consortium now saw a new power, a power that could not be bullied, a power that would not break. Humanity was no longer seen as obsolete. They were seen as resilient. They were seen as fierce. They were seen as unpredictable. And in a universe of cold logic, that made them the most dangerous species of all. Jax did not feel like a hero. He felt tired. He thought of the lives lost. He thought of Admiral Rostova, who was recovering in a medical bay. He thought of the old ships and the brave crews who had given everything. They had not just saved Earth. They had redefined humanity's place in the galaxy. Weeks later, a ceremony was held. It was not a grand celebration. It was a memorial. They unveiled a monument in orbit. It was made from the fused wreckage of a Cathar ship and the OGS Vanguard. Two enemies forever joined in memory. It was a simple, powerful symbol. Admiral Jax Vance stood before the gathered crowd. He spoke quietly. "We stand here today not because of our technology. We stand here because of our spirit. The Cathar were right about one thing. Our old navy was obsolete. It was built for a different time, but they were wrong about what that word means. Obsolete does not mean worthless. It means surpassed. Our old ships were surpassed by newer designs, but the heart of the crew inside, that can never be surpassed. That can never be made obsolete. We won this war with courage, with sacrifice, and with simple, stubborn will. We showed the galaxy that a man with a simple gun can defeat a machine with a superweapon if his cause is just and his will is strong. Let this monument remind us. Let it remind every species that looks upon it. Do not mistake our age for weakness. Do not mistake our simplicity for stupidity. And never, ever mistake our peace for surrender. For we are humanity. We fall, we bleed, we lose, but we always, always get back up, and we will always defend our home. The galaxy had learned a new lesson that day, a lesson written in fire and steel. The lesson was simple. The obsolete had won.